In the previous video, we looked at agent causation and the libertarian view of free will. Now what we're going to do is consider objections to libertarianism. So our question is going to be, is agent causation plausible? If it turns out that agent causation is not plausible, if it's super mysterious and we're not really clear what exactly we mean by this, or if there's some other reason to be skeptical of agent causation, then libertarianism on this way of thinking about the view would be false or unsupported. So let's take a look at what reasons we might have to be skeptical of the view. The first objection says something like this. It looks like agent causation is exactly what the proponent of hard determinism claims is false or impossible, right? When we were talking about why determinism, if it's true, then free will has to be false. We're talking about what we mean by agent causation. We just simply wouldn't have that. And if that's true, then libertarianism looks like it begs the question. Now, I want to be really clear here. What I mean by begging the question is not what is typically meant in popular culture. You may have heard people say this phrase before. You may have heard somebody say, such and such begs the question. I think when people say this, what they typically mean is something like, it raises the question. But that's not what philosophers mean. When a philosopher says that something begs the question, what they're meaning is that it presupposes some view is false. So in this case, agent causation or libertarianism looks like it presupposes that hard determinism is false. We don't want to do that. We don't want to present an argument that assumes our proponent's view is false at the very get-go. Right, that's begging the question, and it's actually a fallacy. So again, I do not mean that it raises the question. Rather, I mean it presupposes that hard determinism is false from the very get-go, which is a fallacy. So that would be an objection. That would be a reason to think that we should be skeptical of libertarianism. Another objection says, what exactly is an agent? It's not quite clear what we mean by agent. And there certainly is no unified theory or view or consensus about what agency is. Now, I guess we can be a little bit forgiving in this regard. Maybe we could say clearly there are agents, but they have to be understood in some sort of physicalistic terms. They have to be understood in terms that we could, study and examine. But if that's the case, then what would it mean to say that causation is internal to the agent? It's internal to the agent who makes some sort of a decision. It couldn't be the brain or the nervous system, right? If it was the brain that we're talking about, if what we mean by internal to the agent is what's inside my skull, well, then that would be event causation, no different than a heart attack or a pregnancy would be a kind of event causation that would be entirely explainable using biology and the physical laws of the universe, right? So that can't be what we mean. And it can't be psychology either, because psychology is, reducible to biology. And if we don't think that psychology is ultimately reducible to some form of biology, then we would be accepting some kind of dualism, some form of substance dualism. And of course, if we accept substance dualism, that comes with its own problems, which brings up the third objection. This objection says, if libertarianism relies on dualism, then it's just as mysterious as dualism is, and it inherits all the objections that dualism has. Remember back at the beginning of the semester, in the first few modules, we talked about substance dualism and why there may be so many problems with that view. Specifically, we looked at the relationship between the mind and the body, and Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia's objection that we call the mind-body problem, the problem of how the physical body interacts with the non-physical mind, right? So here we're just replacing the mind with the agent. If the agent is this immaterial, non-physical thing, then how could it interact with any physical things? It's not clear how you could have the kind of agent causation, or how agent causation would be any different from mental causation understood in some sort of dualistic terms. And this just is our fourth objection, which says if an agent is an immaterial non-physical substance of some form, then it's not clear how we could scientifically study what an agent is. Again, it would be mysterious. What exactly do we mean by an agent if an agent is immaterial? And just as we saw with regard to substance dualism and the mind-body problem, it looks like on this sort of view, psychology would be impossible. Psychology as a science is not something we could do. But it does seem like we can do psychology. It does seem like we can study the mind and what agents are. So it looks like we need to have some sort of a physical story in order to make sense of how we can scientifically study agency or the mind or psychology. And if that's correct, then it looks like we have reasons to be skeptical of the libertarian account of free will.